All right. Good evening, everybody. This is Jeff, Junior Hockey Advisor. Welcome. Glad to see you all. Which camera are we on? We're on over here. Okay. Glad to see you all. Glad we're here. Glad we can get rolling tonight. Couple things. First of all, let's clean up the screen a little bit so we can see each other and chat with each other. There we go. Okay, we're waiting for Mike. Mike's just coming back from the rink. He was doing player evaluations with his team. And that means that he's talking, and if you know Mike, he likes to talk. So we'll get him here in a second when he's able to jump on. Glad to see you all. I know a lot of you, this is the first time for the year. We did take a little bit of a hiatus. Some of it was planned, and some of it wasn't. We'll wait till Mike gets in to chat a little bit about that. Tonight, we are going to jump into a couple different things. First being, we're going to jump into, or one of the topics we're going to talk about is the tender process, and we talk a lot about this. We've done numerous videos on this. If you haven't jumped in, first of all, on our Facebook discussion page, if you're on Facebook, the tender discussion has been popping up. I just posted a video we did a while back. It's a short video. It's only a few minutes, but it discusses how the tender process works, and it's a good baseline for you. You can jump on Facebook discussion, or if you're on YouTube, you can scroll through and find plenty of videos on tenders, but this is the short one. It's, I believe, 5 minutes or so. Jump on there, grab that, watch it. If you're on YouTube, make sure you take the time, like and subscribe, and we'd like you to do the same thing by joining our Facebook discussion group. We sure would appreciate all of that as we get rolling. Once again, I'm Jeff Colson. Who am I, and why do I do this? I've been in the hockey industry for over 30 years. I've been a general manager. I've owned numerous junior teams. I've been a head coach for decades at all levels, especially junior and NCAA college. So what do I do now? What I do is I decipher the code for you. I help you understand the process, and I try to take as unbiased of a position as I can, trying to explain how all this works. And when I say unbiased, for those of you that follow football at all, you get, I forget the quarterback's name. Help me out here. He does College Game Day, sits on the far right. Desmond Howard sits on the far left, and it's not Joel Klatt. And I'm sure somebody will be able to jump in and tell me who that person is. I like him because even though he's an Ohio State grad, and it would be very easy to take a one-stance view on the world, he's pretty objective. And Kurt Herbstreit, that's it. I beat you guys. My dementia kicked in for a little bit, and I still beat you to the answer. But if you know football, Kurt Herbstreit tries to take an unbiased approach, and he does a fairly good job. And once in a while, he's got to say, hey, look, I'm a little biased on this, or I'm a little biased on that. So with that said, I'm going to try to give you as much of an unbiased approach as I can. I do work in the industry, not only by doing this, but I work as a director for one of the North American Hockey League teams, and so does Mike. Mike Bloom will be on in a little bit. Both of us will usually give you insight when we are biased, and we try our best to do that. With that said, we have a chat feature, so when you are watching, if you want to interact, go ahead and put your chat up, put your comments up, and let us know what you're seeing, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and any questions you might have there too. We sure would appreciate that. That makes our life that much easier as we do this. I've got 3 screens going, so once in a while if you see me look over, I'm trying to make sure that I can see if anybody's coming in on the chat groups or any questions are there that we need. So just got to say a few things. I want to say hi to Junie. Haven't seen Junie this year. It's good to see you back on there. I see that there's some YouTube people on there. Hello, good to see you at YouTube. Matt, good to see you. And once again, if you look at the chat there, and I'm going to pull up the chat screen a little bit so you can see it live with us. But if you see your comment come up and it only shows up as Facebook user, there is a link that will show up. And I am going to copy the link, and I'm going to put that link on here for you so that you can see it too. Just give me a second, and we will have that up for you so you'll actually be able to see the let me put it in there right now. It should go in if I do this right. Yeah. I know I'm not the best at this kind of stuff. Anyway, when Bloomer gets on and he's chatting, I will go ahead and put that in there for you. It's just not wanting me to. Oh, it wants me to give who I am first. Forget it. Anyway, there is one on there, and I will make sure we get that to you in a second here. All right, let's get going with the topic tonight. Tenders. So what I did was yes, you're showing up as a Facebook user, whoever put the comment on there, and we'll get those comments up right now. I'm going to go into screen share mode first, and what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you an article. Let me hope that I got the article up now. Okay, here's the article. And there we go. Okay, this article came out on Rink Live. It's a Minnesota e-paper, newspaper, whatever you want to call it. And a young recent college grad wrote an article, and I'll give her credit here. Let's get her name up here so she gets credit for her work. This is an analysis of NHL tenders signed 2022-23 shows which teams follow through the most. Now, this is where I have a problem, and I'm going to make sure that I help you with this process by explaining that this is not a factual article. Hey, let me get her name here. I know it's Sydney Wolf. So Sydney went to one of the Minnesota colleges. She graduated recently, has a background in hockey, so there's no knock on her. It's a well-written piece, but here's the things I have a problem with. Here's the article itself, and it's right in front of you. It says, attempting to keep track of every NHL tender signed is no easy task. There is no public database that shows tenders signed, okay? But we're going to keep going anyway. She says right off the bat that, hey, you know what? It's not an easy task, and we can't get all the information. But she does say something here that's true. She says a tender is a type of contract that can sign up, a player signs that can give a team the exclusive rights. Okay, once a player signs a tender with a team, their rights are held exclusively by that team, and they are no longer eligible for the NHL draft. Well, that's a true statement. Okay, there's nothing wrong with what she just said there, and I'm going to jump back and forth here. And what I mean by that's not a bad statement. It's a true statement. It's just that, you don't need to be in the draft if you're tendered. A tendered is, for all intents and purposes, a tender puts you as a first-round draft pick because tenders are done before the draft. Why would you want to be eligible for the draft when a tender is already in that position that a draft pick is looking for? To be exclusively held by a team for an opportunity to go into that team and know that you're wanted by that team. And, having a placeholder to get you into main camp. Okay, that's both tenders and draft picks do the same thing. They're a placeholder to guarantee that you're a player that is wanted to be at main camp. Okay, that's it. Then at main camp, which is held, mostly in July, main camp gets you there. You have your returning veterans. You have your tenders. And you have your draft picks. At minimum, that's what you have at camp. Then you have your free agents and invited players on top of that. And that could be 6 to 8 teams, plus or minus a couple teams. Everybody does it differently. But once you're at main camp, your job is to make that final roster. At least get into the top 30 or 35 on the protected list that gets you into the fall, okay, which there is another trim down. That's the way the sport works, and most elite sports work. You are not guaranteed anything. You can be a draft pick in the NHL. So parents, when you're worried about this draft pick and this tender thing, and you're concerned about it not being something that's a solid, guarantee, first of all, coach can tell you you're guaranteed, and that's up to you to decide if that word is a bond, or you can treat it like a quasi-contract that he's got a spot guaranteed. Most would say that is a risk. When anybody says that you're guaranteed a spot in sports, it's rare that that's the case, and it's rare that that's true. But, there's no, even in the NHL, if you're drafted, you don't necessarily get a guarantee that you're going to be on the main club. You might not even be guaranteed that you are going to be in the AHL. There is a ton of players that are drafted that stay in college, that don't go with the draft pick, or that just never pans out. Nothing actually happens good with it. So it's very, very concerning to me when people think that a draft is a draft or a tender gets them anything but a spot in the main camp. It's up to you performance-wise to go there. But I want to go back to this article, and let's jump back there, because there's some really good stuff to learn from here, and I think that I want to spend a little more time on this. Okay, so it basically says teams do not have to announce the players they tender. That's true. It is all controlled by the league. I have a spreadsheet up on my laptop right now, which is the most recent tender update, and it shows me all the teams. It shows me who they've tendered, but it's not a public document. It's the North American Hockey League chooses not to make that public, and that's fine. Now, that doesn't mean that individual teams won't use social media and announce that player, or the player won't put a picture of himself up with a pen, and he's looking up at the camera smiling, and he's showing that he's signing a contract. Okay, that happens all the time, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But to get a complete list, you're not going to do it from the outside. So once again, it says these numbers do not include players that were tendered and then moved up to the USHL. Their names are on the list, but we did not include them. See, now that's a statement that kind of gets me and grinds me a little bit, because of course it isn't on there. Just because you move to the USHL is no different than moving to the BCHL or moving to the EHL or moving back to high school or back to U18. A lot of these kids that are on the tender list don't end up on the roster, and there's many, many reasons why. We're going to delve into that a little bit, but I just want to point out that this article points out, it itself, that it's not accurate, and it points out itself it can't really tell you all the information. And they said they're going to try to track it, but they need your help to actually fill in the dots. I would say that's a waste of time. You can if you want. But I'm gonna pull up the actual graph here for you and show you the graph itself. Okay, this is the graph that they're using, and that's Mike. He said he's going to be a few minutes here. All right, so this is the graph they're using. I'm not sure how that shows up for you. I'll see if I can expand that up a little bit. It looks like it's about the best we're going to get right now. This shows you all the teams. And it shows you on top right here total tenders. So there's all the light blue are your total tenders. And on the bottom part is the dark blue. And you wonder, okay, why are some teams showing 20 and some teams only showing 4? And this is supposed to be a complete documentation. Okay, first of all, the light blue shows you total, and the dark blue shows you the amount of tenders that are currently on the roster, okay? So, for example here, this is amazing. New Mexico has 11 tenders and 10 are on the roster. First of all, kudos to them for having such a large amount of tenders. They did a good job. That is rare. That's extremely rare to get that many tenders on a roster in a year given. So now, I'm going to walk through what a tender is as far as the different types of tenders in a second, but the red line across the top shows you the percentage of tenders on a team, with the best team at 90% and the bottom teams at 0. Not fair and not a real good representation. Yes, some of this information is correct. Rochester, if you look here in the middle, did have 20 tenders, okay? You look over here at one of the other teams, I think this is New Hampshire. Yeah, they did have 20 tenders. Now, New Hampshire had 9 make the squad, and Rochester had 13 at that given point. And that's important to mention at that given point. So looking at this graph here, you would say, hey, look, it's a good number to hit if you're somewhere around 60%, a little bit skewed, and not a reality because, boy, there's just a lot to unpack here. I'm going to start by just talking a little bit about what types of tenders there are. There are probably 3 or 4 different types of tender now. Every team gets 10 tenders a year. Okay, every team gets that base package of tenders. Okay, now on top of that, if my team does a really good job of going out to the NA3HL events and does a really good job of going out to the 3PHL events, that's our U18 and Tier 1 programs, and going to their showcases, we get another 1 or 2 possible extra tenders. Some of them are unrestricted depending on the event. Some of them have to be used in the null. Now, in the NA3HL or the NAPHL, I'm sorry about that. That first original 10 that come out, we have allocations in that group that have to be used to the NA3HL. So a lot of times when you see, 100% of the kids don't get there, it's extremely, extremely tough to get a move from the 3HL to the NAHL, okay? The move from Tier 3 to Tier 2 is a large, large jump. Now, it happens every year. We've got several on our roster that have done it. Not all through tenders. Some of them just were on our roster and signed during the year up to the NAHL team, and then were able to continue that into the next year. Some came through the actual tender process. Now, I say that because, those tenders overall are batting probably about 20-25% that they make the roster in the fall. And then of the ones that do make the roster in the fall, that number drops off drastically. And you can go into Elite Prospects and do your own homework on that and figure out the process and why. Or I shouldn't say why. Why is that the right word? You can look at that and say, okay, I can see that this player had 3, 4, 5 games and was dropped back down to NA3HL. So, but going back to that, let's go back to that graph. And now you got an understanding. Last year I think we had 14 tenders. Now we traded a couple away to get players for a playoff run. That's very common. So next year, the year after, we can trade tenders for the current upcoming spring summer for building our main camp there. We can trade our tenders for the year after that too. The league tracks all that, and we have the ability to do that. So tenders are commodities, okay? Not after the player is tendered. Once that tender is being utilized, you don't see a tendered player getting traded. They have to be on the roster to be traded. At least I've never heard of that happening. I hope it doesn't. That'd be a really silly thing to do for everybody involved. But let's get back to it. I want to show you on the graph here a couple other things. All right. So as we look at this, you think some teams are really doing a good job and some teams aren't. New Mexico looks good, but going down to some of those other teams, they also say Shreveport did a really good job. That may be true. Shreveport does have a lot of tenders on the roster, but these dark blue lines are not representative of how many tenders are currently on the roster. If I have 10 tenders, this is the part most people don't understand. I have 10 tenders, and I've already got 15 slots filled for veteran players coming back, or maybe 16 slots filled, okay? And we go into main camp, and we have 3 free agents that are coming in from the USHL or the BCHL that were either drafted by us, not tendered, because I'll explain that in a second, were drafted by us or just purely free agents. They decided to come play in our league. Okay, they take up some spots. So now we're pushing 18 to 20, and we want to be at 25. Hey, even if the best 5 tenders make the squad, only 5 of 10 are making it. Now remember, I could have more tenders. I could have 12, 13, 14 tenders, and maybe I traded for some tenders. Maybe I have 15 tenders. Okay, I can only have 5 that make my protected list and I'm saying the protected list is at 25 in the fall. Let's say it's at 35. I'm going to have tenders that won't make the roster when we cut down to 25 and then 23 eventually in the fall. So it's one of those things where you have to understand what team you're tendering with and what their veterans are and what their outlook is for the next year. A team that's got a veteran coach with a great reputation, there's a really good chance they're going to pick up some USHL drop downs in the fall. So that should be considered in. And you can actually do the homework. You can pull up elite prospects, look at rosters. It'll show you every kid that was rostered during the season for that team. And then you can start putting the math together on it and playing the chronological timeline. They had these guys on the roster game one. These players came back from college, decided to drop from the BCHL, decided to move from the BCHL, decided to drop from the USHL, or got cut from a team, and now they're on Team X. That pushes off usually a younger player. Younger players tend to be draft picks or tenders. So I hope that makes sense, that this is one of those things where you really have little to no control if you're tendered, but you have control and peace of mind that the league wants you. So if you got questions on it, please ask, because I want to make sure I'm giving this its due as far as explaining this. Now, the other part of this is why do you want to be tendered? What is the purpose of being tendered? And that comment that was made in that article about, then you're not eligible for the draft. Why would you want to be drafted? Okay, why do you want to be tendered or drafted? Well, it is that ability to get in the door with a team. And for a lot of players, it works out very well. They get tendered or drafted, and they actually play. Now, can you play in the null? Can you play in okay, let's back up a little bit on that one. USHL tenders, completely different than the null. When people talk tenders, 90% of the conversation centers around the null. It is the tier 2, highest level tier 2 you can play. It is where the vast majority of D1 players, and combined with D3 players, it is the league you go to play college hockey. There's hands down, virtually every guy on the roster. Now, you can say, well, what about the USHL? The USHL is only 13 teams. It's a smaller league versus 30-plus teams in the North American Hockey League. The other part of it is, if you get tendered inside of the USHL, you're one of the top players in the nation. You're probably one of the top players in North America. You could possibly be one of the top players that are going to be drafted in the NHL. Totally different thing. A player that gets tendered in the USHL, that team gives up their first-round draft pick. Okay, basically what they're doing is they're taking their draft pick early and saying we want this player, but they don't have to wait. If you wait for draft day, everybody gets a chronological number they're drafting by, inverse to where you first place goes last, second place goes second to last. So the last place team gets the first draft pick. By using your tender, you're not waiting and risking losing a player to be drafted. You're making a relationship with a player and pulling him in right away and making sure he's got a home. Totally different situation there. You want to be tendered, and there's only a handful. Sometimes teams don't use their tender because they don't have that go-to player that they know that will come play for them. Because remember, if you're really, really good and you're one of the best in North America, and the last place team in the USHL that doesn't have the best record for placement in NHL placement or even Division I placement, you can basically say, I'm not interested. But if they draft you, that's your choice. That's where you have to go because unless you get cut. So does that make sense? Give me some comments here. Let me know if any of this is making sense here. If not, I'd like to know about it. I'd like to know what you're thinking, what I'm saying wrong, what I'm not conveying properly. I see we got a pretty good audience going right now. You got to have some questions on this. I sure would like to see them. I'd sure like to know what you're thinking and what you're not thinking. So just going through the comments to see if anybody's jumped on. Last one is Omaha, Nebraska. Good to see you on there. Amesbury, see you on there. Carl, I see you. Good to see you back, Carl. It's been a while. Vermont's on. Good to see you there. Alberta's on. Go Oilers. Yeah, go Oilers. I'm fond of Alberta. Been up there a lot for hockey. All at the yes, thank you, Herb Street. I got that. Northern Virginia, good to see you on. So a lot of these are going on. As soon as Mike gets on, we do have a feature now that will put the chat right up on the screen like this. Oh, I guess I can use it till he gets there. So it shows the conversations coming in right there. Totally makes sense. Confusing at first, Matt. If there's something that doesn't make it, the confusing points, please put them on. I can see one coming in here. Can you get tendered in one league but maintain open rights in the other leagues? The answer is absolutely yes. Okay. The tender and draft for the null is only good in the null. The tender process for the NCDC is only good in the NCDC. So in NA3 is the same way. Wherever you get tendered is where you're at. Okay, that's it. You can, if I get tendered in the null and I choose to go play in the AJHL, there's no problem. I go there. That's the way it is. Now halfway through the season, I go, I got to go home. I'm homesick. If you come back to the null, you're not. Once that final roster is set, we'll get into that. We'll wait for Mike. That's a good discussion, though. I want to make sure I put that down coming back because I don't want to misstate this, and I want to make sure that Bloomer gets a chance to put some of this in. Tender sounds like it's a huge interest for the team. Never any guarantees. That's a good statement, and I thought I put it. Okay, it shows up below me, so I won't be able to do it. Are tenders a trap? That's one way to put it. Are players trapped when they get tendered? Well, first of all, they're optional. Nobody's telling you have to sign a tender agreement. You can wait for the draft. That's perfectly fine too. And we'll go into detail on the draft at a later date because the null draft is a little topsy-turvy. Sometimes the best players are drafted last, and we say, why? Well, sometimes a player is going to be drafted from the USHL or the BCHL is a risky, a elephant hunting. You're not sure you'll get them, but if they do come, it'll be great. That might be a 7th round pick. The pick order isn't always by like it works in the NHL or the NFL where the very best get picked in the first round. Sometimes it's that way, and it depends team by team if that's the way. But let's save that draft conversation for a later date. Tenders, why won't a kid come to a team with a tender? What would be the reason that a kid doesn't show up, it gets tendered into the North American Hockey League? Well, the AJHL or the BCHL might be more to his liking. Maybe he's Canadian and he wants to stay close to home, and those two leagues are great. Maybe, for example, this year, almost everybody that's drafted is an 05 or an 06, tendered up to this point. And the tenders, the process is nowhere near done yet. There's still a lot of tenders out there. I'd say that it's about 50% of the way complete, and we'll talk about that in a second, the timeline on tenders. I'm writing myself notes so I don't get behind on this. The actual tenders, why a kid would say no is sometimes they're young. If you take a first-year U18 player and he gets tendered to go to Shreveport, who did a really good job this year with their tenders, or Rochester, maybe they get into the camp and they're a little naive to the strength, size, and speed. Maybe they're a great player, but just need another year. So that player was tendered. The team wanted him. They came to camp, and he just wasn't quite ready yet. So he goes back to his team. Happens all the time with prep players. Happens all the time with U18 players. The null doesn't pull a lot of U16 players in. By design, it's an older, stronger league. So a lot of times that'll happen. Some kids just get outright cut too, and they'll either go to the 3HL team, and sometimes a tender is picked with that in mind. Hey, look, he's not quite ready yet, but he's 3HL ready, and we'll keep him in our process so he can skate some practices during the week. We'll pull him up for a few games in the fall and see if he can catch on, and if he can catch on, we'll keep him. So that's why you see some teams that have tenders will end up on their 3HL. Sometimes that's by design, or sometimes it just happens naturally when a kid gets in and he's just not quite ready to go yet. I hope that makes sense on that. Let's see. If you get tendered and do not, okay, I got to make sure I don't miss them. We got a lot coming in now. Let's see. Matt asked, tender sounds like it's a huge interest for the team. Okay, I already did that one. Sorry. If you get tendered and do not make the team, can the team that tendered you tell you they want you to tell you where they want you to play? They can tell you, but you do not have once a team that tendered you cuts you either at main camp or in the fall, and you're not on their protected list anymore, you're a free agent. You can go. There are guys that are tendered that will get cut in main camp on day one, drive 400 miles, get into another main camp with another team, and be on a roster in the fall with another team. It happens. That happens a lot. And that could be just because they don't fit the needs of the team that tendered them for whatever reason. Maybe they came in and the team thought that he was going to be a stronger, presence on the ice, and he's more of a skill guy. They already have skill guys. They're looking for, a little more beef, a little bit more intimidation, and he doesn't fit the role. He can get picked up with another team. That's fine. Once you don't get on that protected list. So coming out of main camp, you got all these different groups coming into main camp. We already talked about it. Veteran players, returning players. You've got invites. You've got your tenders. You've got your drafts. And let's say I'm just going to make it an easy number. You got 100 kids there. Okay, and they got to get that number down to 30 for the protected list. And once again, I'm using easy numbers so it makes sense. Okay, 70 kids get cut, and let's say 5 of those are players that were tendered. The nice thing about this is if you call other teams right away or you reach out to other teams right away, because you were a tendered player, they're going to listen a little bit more. Oh, you were tendered with Shreveport, you were tendered with New Jersey, you were tendered with Johnstown, whoever. They're going to go, okay, great. That the fact that another team already vetted you that says you're a good player, we'll let you come into camp. Come on into camp. We'll get you into camp. And we'll see what you're rate of. That happens all the time. So can a team ask you to play U18 again? Absolutely. Happens all the time. A lot of people follow the advice of the junior team that tendered them. And even in our program, that happens often, and the player will come back the next year and make the roster. That happens too. So our current captain, I believe, Bergeron might be like that. If not, there's several other examples, and this is where Bloomer helps me with my dementia and making sure that it makes sense. So, okay, Matt says, I was confused last year. Then I did more research. You did a great job explaining so far. Thank you for that. Carl here. So, in your opinion, you think the NAHL is better playing D1 than the USHL? No, I did not say that, but I'll explain where it is an advantage. The USHL, for the most part, if you look at the leagues, they cater to the top level of our Division I leagues and Division I teams. So you're going to see a lot of Minnesota, Michigan, Providence, Ohio State, North Dakota, those teams there. What you usually don't see is a lot of teams from the Atlantic League playing USHL. There are players that do. This is not a hard, fast rule, but that league is usually filled with other leagues, and they fill mostly with North American Hockey League leagues, and that's the way it is. Now, when I say this transfer portal and this ability to move and add fluidity every year to where players start and where they end, it's almost crazy trying to keep up with how rosters are built and developed. And honestly, most Division I coaches are doing a lot more winging it than they used to do on building their rosters. For example, they bring in a rookie that there used to be a time where a rookie might take 2 to 3 years to be a solid player in the roster. First year they come in, maybe they get redshirted. Second year, maybe they get 15 games. Third year, they're playing every game in a role. Fourth year, they're one of the key go-to guys. That's not a path. That is a path that was very traditional. And then you had your outliers, your really good players that could come in and maybe even as a freshman get shifts and then continue to build their role. So when I say that it's a great path for Division One, remember, not everybody's a superstar at the Division One level. There's a lot of, I would say it this way. The Atlantic relies heavily on the USHL. And let me see if I can pull something up, or on the NOL. Let me see if I can help that a little bit. And I'm going to pull up some information here, and I'll do it live with you because we can just go over to screen share. Okay, this is my my Elite Prospects page, and it is set on the profile. I want to get to Elite Prospects too because some questions came up on that. I'll talk about that later. Okay, so if I just go in here and I type in Atlantic. I'm reaching way over to try to get this in. And let's see why it's not typing in for me here. Okay, every time I try to do something to help, and then now the keyboard is not showing up on there. Okay, I'm not going to do it live. I'll put up a video on this and show you live on that. I'm not sure why I'm not able to type in right now. But remember, this is all brand new equipment. We've got all brand new computers, all brand new monitors, and we had to reload all of our software. And sometimes I come across a glitch like this, and I apologize. So let's go back to just me talking to you, and while we wait on our man Bloomer to come in. Now, what I would have done there, and I can still probably do it on my laptop, but not be able to show you guys live, is you have the ability to screen out if you're using certain programs like Elite Prospects. So what I'll show you live, and I'll put this up later, is if I put up the Atlantic and as a league, you know what, I'm going to wait on that. It's just, I can explain it pretty easy. You're going to see a huge number of players from the Atlantic that are null guys. You're going to see a littler percentage of USHL guys in that league, and it's a diminishing return on both sides. So USHL, Elite D1 programs, lots of USHL, very few null guys. Like Michigan right now maybe has a player or two that has null experience. I can go to every Atlantic roster, and most of them will have at least 50%, if not more. They'll get more into the Canadian junior leagues. They get more into the BCHL. But you're going to see all your null guys playing in the Atlantic and filling in on the elite teams, where there's a few on there. Doesn't mean they're not the best players, but mostly they're not the best players. Okay, and that's not a knock on the null. Those guys fill in certain places, but think about it this way. The USHL has tons of NHL draft picks. The null has several NHL draft picks. So those players that are at the NHL level are going to go to the elite D1 programs. The players like in the null, they're going to go to programs that are not, elite's not a good word for it, that are not the same level. It's very clear. You take a Canisius, great school, no problems there, but year in and year out compared to North Dakota, compared to Michigan, Notre Dame, Providence, they're not competing with the same level of talent. That's just the reality to it. And you look at some of the smaller ones. Every once in a while, one of these teams are an outlier and they jump up there into the top 10 or the top 20 in the rankings. But for the most part, you don't see too many of those teams, and you definitely don't see them in the Frozen Four very often. So that's my point on that. So hope that helps, Carl. Best time to get tendered is a null pre-draft, correct? I don't know if there's a best time to get tendered. I think you can get tendered at any point. And while we're talking about that, let's get him in. The legend in his own mind. There we go. There he is. Bloomer's here. Mike Bloom, how you doing, sir?
Hello, Jeff. I'm good. How are you?
I like this that you're wearing your Lions hat. with your Red Wings behind you, right after I talked about how you're unbiased and you'll always look at the world unbiased. I just did a big thing on how unbiased you were. And then you jump
good.
on just with all your Homer on. Just Homer,
Where's
Homer,
my
Homer.
side by side? Why am I only looking at you?
You're showing up side by side on the real screen.
Oh, okay.
At least.
Oh.
And then there's the chat box on the side now. Tell me what you guys think about the chat box. Is it working? Is it worth the wait for our big transition? There we go. Got our latest ones up there. And I think I can drag that down and open it up a little bit further. Look at that. Okay.
So I don't see any of that on my end.
Maybe you got to open up one of the screens from like Facebook or YouTube or something. Just mute it and open it up on another screen. So we're talking tenders, Bloom. First of all, let's catch up a little bit. We haven't been on screen together since last year.
Pretty much. Well, yeah, technically, for sure.
And lots of things have happened since then. Michigan beats Ohio State. Big. Okay. Michigan wins the Big Ten championship. Now we're talking football, folks. This is important. I know you might not all be here to listen to me talk football, but then Michigan goes on and beats, probably without argument, the best program of the last 50 years, Alabama. Incredible program. Take care of them, stuff them out of the way. Then they take care of Washington, which puts together the strength of schedule argument down the tubes. Michigan is the undisputed national champion in college football. That all happened, man. And then Detroit wins a playoff game. As a Michigan guy or as a Detroit guy, can it be any better for you right now?
No. And I got a lot of my friends and people that were texting me after the Lions won, like, hey, congrats. Like, that's awesome. And honestly, I feel like I'm playing with house money because after Michigan won a national championship, I honestly, whatever the Lions do, it's just icing on the cake at this point. So I hope they keep doing it. It's something that, we're not used to as Lions fans, seeing them not only get to the playoffs, but actually win one. And honestly, the way that the dominoes fell with the other teams that had lost so far on their side of the conference, it's kind of wide open, when it comes to their path. And they don't have to play in any cold weather games. They're either indoors or in a nice climate, so that bodes well for them. So let's see what happens here.
All right, we're caught up. Oh, by the way, did you happen to see me stand on the sidelines in the Ohio State game?
Did I see you? No, I did not see you.
Players draped on both sides of me. First quarter, I think I stayed out there for probably half the first quarter and got invited down and watched all the warm-ups. Said some not so nice things to Urban Meyer. Said some not so nice things to not directly to him, but enough that Ryan Day could hear me. I was with a few other former Michigan football players, and we got our couple jabs in here and there, And Urban, to be honest with you, the guy was. I'm not a fan, but he was a class act. He handled himself very well. I'm sure he gets it every time he comes into the Michigan Stadium, and he doesn't cower from it. But no, I got a chance to be down there. I got a chance to put a little clip together on my phone, standing right next to the banner as the players ran through and touched the banner. And but now I'm in mode. Two of my roommates, the week before the national championship. It's so intense that each of us bring our stats we do a Zoom call, and we bring our stats about, okay, what do we got to do? We have nothing to do with the coaching this team, but we're all like, what we got to do is this, and on third down we got to be doing this, and we got to make sure we got to pull this guy over to get him into this situation, and we got to basically ISO this guy over here, and we're already doing that for next year. So it's a blast, and there's no better feeling right now than being a Michigan Wolverine. So, anyway, let's get back to talking.
You might actually be coaching the team next year, depending on what Harbaugh does. So keep going.
Yeah, if about 1,500 other people say no, I might have a shot at getting on that staff. There's a few people in front of me, but I'm still holding out hope.
There you
Uh,
go.
I think I got a better shot of being the AD because it sounds like they want his head more than anything else. Yet we
Yeah.
digress. All right, we're caught up. Mike Bloom. Mike is working out of the Chicago area. He is a skills instructor by day, and he also is a director for the Lone Star Brahmas in the North American Hockey League, and he's also a coach of two different teams in the same program. Mike is extremely busy at all times. What program are you with, Mike?
Chicago Jets.
The Chicago Jets. Okay, so we're talking about the tender process. The questions that are coming up right now. The best time to get tendered is a NHL pre-draft, correct? So that question came up. In other words, is it the best time to get drafted then? It is a time to get drafted, and it's probably, if you're not on the radar much, if you get invited to a pre-draft camp and you do get a draft invite, that's awesome. That's what the whole purpose is to get you on to the next level. So yeah, that's why teams do the pre-drafts, is to find players for the few tenders that are left by that time of the year, and for the draft process. So if you come out of pre-draft either invited to main camp, just generally, that's great. That's what you're trying to do. Remember, if I walk out of a pre-draft and that team invites me to their main camp, once I get to main camp, all footing is equal to the drafts and to the tenders, on at least at first glance. Now, what's the difference between the drafts and the tendered and that free agent? The amount of looks they get during the camp by the staff and by the coaches, the general manager, the owners, whoever's watching to put that team together. It could go either way. In other words, maybe they really know where all their tenders stand and they're just looking for guys like you. They were just invites and they're putting a little more time watching the invites. Maybe they're really interested in their tender group and they want to watch and focus mostly on their tenders. Maybe they're looking at their veterans and seeing if they've got it. Maybe the tenders and the invites are really, really good, and they've got to spend time looking at their returning players to see if some of those guys aren't up to snuff and that they have to replace. So I'm not sure, if it's an advantage or disadvantage to come in as an invite, but you're there. And the whole idea is, once you're there, you're in a pool of players, like I was explaining earlier. Once you're in that pool of players, there is no tags anymore. Veterans can be cut, tenders can be cut, draft picks can be cut, invitees can be cut. So I'm not sure that there's any advantage once you're there. Mike, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, first, just when it comes to once you get to main camp, and all bets are off as far as whether you're a returner, you're a tender, you're a draft, or you're a free agent invite. We had this year out of our camp a kid that was a free agent invite who, when you look at, we'll just say he's a right shot defenseman. We had a returner, maybe two returners, and two tender kids. So he would have been the fifth kid playing on the right side when we come to training camp or main camp. He ended up beating out two of the tendered kids and made his way not only onto the roster, but into the lineup as a free agent invite. And it's a credit to him that he continued to get better and pick up the systems quicker and play the way that he's supposed to play based within our system. And he ended up passing up guys that were tendered, not drafted, tendered. So this happens all the time, and that's just one position and one scenario. So you can't get too caught up on whether or not you're tendered. You can't get too caught up whether or not you're drafted. Obviously, when these teams do put an asset towards you, they are assuming that you will be on the roster, but it's still up to you to make it and earn your spot. When it comes to like when the timing of getting tendered, because I know that was a question I think on the discussion board too. I would say I think that one of the questions was, what's the advantage of tendering or not tendering or whatever? And they both go kind of hand in hand with what I'm going to say here. I think the only time there's a disadvantage in tendering is if you tender too soon and you didn't give yourself a full chance to see what your options were, unless you knew that the program of your choice actually was the one you were talking with and you tendered, and at that point you got what you wanted. But sometimes kids feel, when it comes to the North American League, as soon as November 1st comes, they're going to take whatever comes their way because they're so in a hurry to tender. And next thing you know, you could have had a program that is more known to move guys to D1, or usually more of a playoff steady team. And because you've tendered so soon, you don't have the opportunity to obviously go with that other program. So that would be the only disadvantage of it. I like when players kind of take their time and do their homework and really figure out where the best places for them. And if they can tender there, it's kind of like a perfect marriage at that point. But when it comes to the pre-draft camps, if you're waiting to get tendered there, to your point, Jeff, there's not as many available tenders at that point. All of these different NA teams are going to utilize all of their tenders before the draft, but they can't hold a pre-draft camp until the season has officially ended, which usually between when the Robertson Cup finals are finished and when the draft is in mid-June, at most you get about 3 weekends where you can host as a program these different pre-draft camps. So
well,
really,
there's another option or another dynamic to that is why don't you see more junior players from Canada, the BCHL, being tendered? Well, you might see a player tendered from one of the non-USA hockey leagues. For example, you could tender a player from the NCDC. I don't know why that player would want that, because then that NCDC team's just going to get upset with him and frustrated with him because he's not focused on that. And honestly, that player could leave and just go join the NAL team if there was really that opportunity there immediately. So you won't see too many juniors being tendered until leagues start finishing in Canada. So if the AJ team is not a playoff-bound team and they finish February 15th, I'm just making that date up, okay? There's plenty of room before you can stop using your tenders. Boom, that player might be tendered right away. So you'll see some late BCHL and some CJHL teams, especially teams out of the CCHL, or players out of the CCHL, the OJHL, and the AJHL. You'll see those guys being added late on. And so some teams will keep their powder dry with a couple tenders because they've already got their eyes on some guys from the Canadian markets that are going to finish before the deadline for the tenders to be done. It doesn't mean that if you're a U18 player, they're not still interested in you, but it's just like anything else. If I've got the ability in the NHL to bring in a 3-year vet that's got good numbers with lots of upside, not injury prone, or I've got a rookie that could get up to the same level as that 3-year vet, I'm going to put that 3-year vet on the roster if I can get him at a decent price and lock him in on a contract that makes sense. So a U18 player is still, that's speculation that you're going to be able to make it to the junior level. If I've got an AJ guy or a CC guy that's a documented veteran that's got 50, 80, 100 games under their belt playing junior hockey, it's pretty much a no-brainer in most cases. In most cases. I'm not saying that, in every case it's junior hockey. It's never the case. A couple things first. Okay, thank you, Matt, for telling us that we are bussing. Okay. Once again, I don't know what the hell that means, but okay, we're bussing. I guess that's good. You did put it on there. Bussing is great. Good to see that. One of the Facebook users put on there, Lindenwood Tide, Wisconsin. Yeah, I'm not sure that I would hang my hat on that one because, Wisconsin's playing in their where'd it go? I just lost it. Okay, there it is. Lindenwood Tide, Wisconsin. I wouldn't hang my hat on that much. Lindenwood's playing for a Stanley Cup in Wisconsin. I don't even know when the game was played. I'm not aware of the game or the score. But remember, your top teams in the NCAA ranks, for example, Michigan, they took a month off and they come back and they play an easy game. They played Stonehenge or whatever the hell that new team is called. I forget the name of them.
Stonehill.
Yeah, I like Stonehenge. It kind of reminds me of the Rock movie where they bring Stonehenge down and the statue's about this big on the stage. Name the movie.
I have no idea.
You don't remember the movie? Okay, come on in the comments and we'll see who actually knows what I'm talking about. It's a parody. It's a spoof, but I'm not going to give you that one. Anyway, Michigan takes a month off. Why do they take a month off during the middle of the season at the Christmas time? It's because of juniors, because of junior worlds. They lose 4, 5, 6 guys to that, and I'm not sure if Wisconsin is in the same boat. But a lot of the teams coming out of the Christmas break, they backload an easy game or two to get rolling again because they take that big break. Michigan took a month off because they knew their 4 or 5 best players were going to go play in the Worlds. And they're not going to stop those kids from going and play to the World, so they just schedule around it and make sure they keep themselves as clean as they can. So, when you get into how the rankings work and how the points are gained, total goals for, total goals against, goal differential, all those things, strength of schedule, all those things factor in. They would rather have a weak strength of schedule game that they don't do as well. I think they won that game big, but that they don't do as well in than they would a game that's with a better strength of schedule where they get beat 4 or 5 goals. They don't want to get beat 4 or 5 goals by Michigan State or by Minnesota or North Dakota coming out of the break, because that really, really would hurt them. So hope that makes sense. All right, listen, I'm going to tell you guys right now, I don't have glitches with my equipment that often. It's not that big of a deal. This is all brand new. I did this the other day. I gave you a clean sweep around and showed you all the new stuff. It's like learning to speak Swahili, man. I mean, I got stuff in front of me now that I never had before, and I don't know where things are at. And so I'm learning as we go. And we could take, at my age, it'd take me 6 months of 8 hours a day in classroom where I can just get on and try to wheel it and figure it out and wing it, and that's what I'm doing. So, and Mike, you actually went out and bought some of the same equipment, didn't you?
Yeah, I got a Mac Mini as well, so that's a little bit of an adjustment to say the least. I'm used to iPhones and iPads, but the actual computer version of even just like Xing out of a website and everything is like completely different. So
Yeah.
It's good though. I definitely like it, and I'm glad I made the purchase. Everything is so much quicker and sharper, but it does take some getting used to. And even now, like I said, when I logged in at one point when we were doing this before, I could see the comments and I could see everything, and now I can't. So there are some changes that I don't know if it's on my end or your end, but either way, I feel like I'm flying blind. So I know what you're feeling.
I don't know the answer to that. We'll chat about that, actually. Let's get back to some questions. You okay with that, Bloom?
I'm great with that.
Okay. Knowing that you've only been on the broadcast for 5 minutes, just want to make sure you weren't tired out or bushed from.
I literally had parents meetings from 5 o'clock until 7:45 of me speaking nonstop.
Well,
I know you're used to that because you never stop talking, but I'm not prepared for that.
Listen, okay? Listen once in a while. Learn your players by listening. Bring some Harbaugh'ism in. Bring some Harbaugh'ism in.
Players.
All right, Chris has a question. Do NOL and USPHL combines help with getting scouted for a team? My son is an 06, number 1 in California, U18, AA, 1.75. Goalie, okay. Just getting ready to push hard and get him on a team. Okay. Yeah. You're in a real tough spot there because making a jump from, first of all, you've got a couple things that you're going to have to overcome. One is proximity. You're going to get no scouting unless your California team goes somewhere else, like if they go to St. Louis, Chicago, Detroit, Boston. You'll get possibly looked at. So that's number 1, proximity. Number 2, AA. Very difficult to get scouted for the NOL and the USPHL, or excuse me, the USHL at that level. You said USPHL. That's different. I apologize. Let me backtrack that. Hit rewind. I read it as USHL. Now that I look at it, it's USPHL. No, there's USPHL teams out there that'll scout you. You're not going to get NOL looks by proximity because you're in California. You're not going to get NOL looks. Even if you go to camp, it's going to be a tough row to hoe because of the experience factor. If I've got 10 goalies in camp and 3 or 4 goalies, all things are equal, and I've got one guy that's coming to me from Bell Tire, or he's coming from a prep program, and then I've got a goalie that's a AA goalie that could look pretty much the same, we're probably going to falter onto the fact, well, a couple things come into play. Size comes in there, but the experience factor. If I've got a guy that's already playing Tier 1 Elite and he's seeing the same style of shots and the same style of play that's going to generate up into the next level, we're probably going to fault on that player over a player that's probably not seeing the same thing. Okay, and the biggest thing you see, and I'm only speaking for Null, not speaking for the USPHL. When my son made the transition from a junior league, a very good one, he went from the AJ his first year and played 2 years in the Null. This is my youngest son. The first thing he said right away is the shots. He goes, I didn't notice the speed. The skating didn't seem to be any different, but how heavy the shots were and how fast the releases were. And as a defenseman that's trying to get in front of shots, he goes, the adjustment to the shots, that was the biggest thing. You talk to goalies, the adjustments to the shot is the biggest thing they see. So if you're already seeing kids that are going to be 100% Null guys playing at U18, not 100%, but there's going to be a good percentage of guys coming out of a Honey Baked or a Bell Tire or a team out of Chicago, the Mission. There's going to be a ton of those guys playing Null level hockey or higher. You're not seeing that coming out of California playing AA. I'm not trying to knock the process. I'm just saying know what coaches are doing. This is the objective, no bullshit way coaches look at the situation. Mike, anything to add on that?
Well, I live in the AA world with where I coach, so I'm familiar with kind of the question, and it's something that I have to have with actually the parents meeting that I just had today. We kind of covered a lot of this, and you're going to have to get into Tier 3 level. So it's good that he's talking about the USPHL, the NA3, the EHL, like the Tier 3 junior levels. That's where AA guys are going to have to start. And then from there, they can develop their way up. I think his question was about combines and whether or not he can be seen if he goes to those different events. Usually when you have like a league sponsored event, whether it's like the NA or I'm sure the USPHL has something similar, they usually mandate their teams to have representatives there to watch those different events. So those are good ways to be seen. It doesn't mean that something's going to come out of attending one of those events, but at least the right people are supposed to be in the building, whether they're running the team, like coaching the team while they're playing, or in the stands and talking to guys and things like that. And, some combines are better than others, but that's part of the process of figuring out which ones are and aren't.
Okay, a couple things I want to do is I mentioned a few things. Let's talk a little bit about the timeline, the tender process timeline. I said I wanted to wait till you got on here. Walk through, in your opinion, Mike, and let's try to keep this to about a minute and a half so we can get through we got a lot of comments I want to get through. So give me your best minute and a half on, the start through the finish of the timeline for the actual tender process.
From the team perspective or from the player family perspective?
You take the team, and then if we got to add some color to it, I'll jump in from the parent player side.
Okay, from the Null perspective?
Yeah, just the Null.
Yeah, so from the Null, on November 1st of every year, the North American League is going to release the tenders to all the different teams. So that's when they'll have the ability at that point to start talking to players and offering tenders and players to sign and things like that. That happens November 1st.
Clarification on that. Every team is given an allotment of 10 to start with.
Right.
But you fill in the but, because there's different ways that 10 changes, and you can help us with
obviously it's an asset, so they can be traded. So some teams could have gone on a playoff run the year before and traded a couple of their tenders for the following year, which means when they get released on November 1st, they may not get the 10 that they would typically get. They could get 8 if they made some moves. They could get 15 because they were one of the teams that traded their players for future assets and things like that. So that number is, even though it should be 10 per team, they can be traded and moved and and acquired and things like that. So each program could be different from that respect. But regardless of how many you're going to receive within that year, they all are released on November 1st to start being used. Okay. Now, typically, go ahead.
I was going to say, what that first initial burst of tenders
Right.
that are signed, where do they come from?
Well, usually they're kids you may have been in conversations with the year prior and really liked them, and you kept tabs on them and kept that communication going. So you know as a team and that family knows right away, like when November 1 hits and these tenders are available, it's a shoe in. We're signing and we're ready for the next year.
Right,
Sometimes that happens where
and that's usually
we're
a kid
talking
that
about players.
that's usually a
Go
kid
ahead.
that's been seen. This may be a kid that's already been to their main camp in the past. This is a
Yep.
kid that's got experience at U18 or maybe prep, maybe another junior league, and that's usually the guys that are getting that first burst. And that's like the first few days, like you said, that's pent up. That's sorry, that's pent up. That's guys that have already been selected from the year before.
Yep. So
Okay,
that's
what
where
else?
you'll see in a lot of cases a lot of kids tender right off the bat, and then there'll be a little bit of a lag where they kind of sprinkle in over the next month or so, kind of getting through the holidays and whatnot. And
And what
then
what key event triggers the next round, and what type of player comes in that next round? Blaine,
I'm not sure where you're going, but go ahead.
Blaine, Blaine.
Well, Blaine happens before November 1st.
But that's a key event. I wasn't saying
Yeah.
So Blaine happens, and Blaine is U18 teams from all through the NAPHL and invited
Right.
teams that come in as guest teams. And first of all, there are two different types of tenders that come out that can be used for those Blaine NAPHL players. Can you kind of explain the two types of tenders that team could have?
Yeah, so the league is set up to where the NAPHL, which now I think they call them, it's like tier one or it's tier
Yeah,
or
they
something
call them
like that.
tier one.
Yeah, so that league, we have the ability to tender two players every year from who's playing within that league. So for the most part, a lot of teams are going to scout that first because not only is that event when everybody goes to Blaine, the whole league from an NA perspective is there playing games and crossover games against each other. The AAA teams are also there that weekend, so they get that exposure from all the NA teams. So then when you get to November, in many cases, teams already have an idea based on watching those AAA teams in that league for that event. And then there's usually a couple more events that happen that they can continue to watch these kids. A lot of times that big burst at November 1st is kids that get tendered from that particular league.
Right.
Then you get into everybody else that's a midget or prep school kid playing everywhere else. Then you have 7 tenders. Again, if you haven't traded any of those or whatever, you'll get 7 to use. There's no stipulation. It can be kids from anywhere, including that league, but they could be from junior hockey, they could be from Europe, they could be from
Right. Right.
any AAA program and whatnot. So then you have those that you can use throughout.
And so when
As
does the
you
period
go-
when does the period end for the tender process?
It ends usually noon the day before the draft in June. So the day before, everyone's got to have their tenders submitted to the league, and that's where the league will go in and remove those players' names from the database we use when we draft. When the draft comes, we can't click a kid and say we want to draft this kid, and it's like, well, he's been tendered by this team already. He
And
won't populate.
there are teams, and this happens at every level. Even NHL people aren't as deep sometimes as you think they are. That they just literally go down a list and look to see what's available by name, where they've had no contact with a player. They've talked. I can probably name at least 4 to 6 players every year that I personally have scouted. They go, hey, I didn't even know that team was interested in me, and all of a sudden they get drafted by a team. So anyway, good. Anything else you want to add on that? And we'll jump into some more questions.
I'll just add that as the season goes on and teams go to different events to scout players, and there's different ways that teams can acquire more tenders throughout the year, usually 2 or 3 more. They can, by showing up at these different events, and whether they're combines or they're the showcases or so on and so forth, they can get additional tenders to use on players. So, sometimes when you say each team gets 7 tenders that they can use on anyone, they start to say, whoa, that's not very many. They can acquire more by, again, being in attendance at these different events
Right.
and scouting it and, things like that.
All right, Danielle has a question. It says, "How often are kids pulled from the NA3 to the North American Hockey League, especially if they have a team in the same program? It seems like a lot of kids hear this when they're being asked to play for the NA3 team." So that's a great question. I'll jump in first, and Mike, add any color you want to this. Um, every team has the ability to do that. The advantage, if you have your own team, is that player could have already been skating a few practices. He could have jumped in to fill out a line because there was a couple injuries. So in practice, that third line or that second line needed some help until little Johnny's ankle heals up. So maybe they bring a guy up from the NA3 team to fill that spot during the week, so the other lines all don't get jumbled. That's one strategy that a coach will use. So can a player come up to practice? That happens quite a bit. If they're in the same building and in the same city, you see quite a bit of that. And I know Mike is going to give you some stats that we experience in our own program. But the other part of this is it's a double-edged sword. If you do get pulled up, that's your shot. That's your shot to shine. And sometimes it's tougher to be a player that gets pulled up to prove themselves than an outsider that never has played in the NAL to go into main camp and prove themselves. Because everybody's skating with different people in a main camp. You're thrown into a spot where the whole team knows the systems. The whole team knows exactly what they do. They know the rhythm. They know each other. And then you're thrown in that spot. It's tough. It's very tough. It doesn't mean it can't be done. It happens quite a bit. Now, once again, you're not going to see 5 or 6 players come up to a NAL team. I'm sure somebody will pull a stat out that says, "Oh no, back in 2018, this team did it." Of course, that's going to happen somewhere, but it's not normal. You'll get 1 or 2 players that can move up from a team. Teams that sell that are usually teams that can prove it. In other words, if a team says, we get players that come up all the time, 1 or 2 is fine. You might get 5 or 6 that actually get a game or 2, but players that get up and stay up, or get up, play a few games, and make the roster next year and stay on the NAL team. The teams that say they do that are usually teams that can prove it, and they can prove it statistically. They can show you rosters, and it's all up on Elite Prospects. You can see that. Mike, I know you've got a lot to say on this one because you like this topic.
Yeah, I mean, it's always the narrative always flies when it comes to the lack of opportunity that people think. But, just like we talked about when it comes to the tendering process, where there's 2 tenders that need to be utilized in the NAPHL level of AAA, every NA team has to also tender an NA3 player. So if you've got, what do we've got, 34 NA teams now? So that's at least 34 players at the
It may have gone up 5 since the last time we talked. I don't know.
I know. Since our last broadcast, we might be at 60 now. But
yeah.
I think there's either 32 teams or 34 teams now. I don't have it in front of me to know for sure. But again, that's 30-plus kids are going to get tendered in this process. So that gives them opportunity to move on for the next year. Aside from that, you also are going to draft an NA3 player when you get there. So that's an additional 30 more players that are going to get that opportunity. What they do with that opportunity remains to be seen, but they're going to get that based on the league advancement opportunity that they're getting. I know from our program specifically, one of the kids that played 2 years for our NA3 program 3 years ago, so 2 years before, and then last year, was one of our leading scorers almost the whole year in his first year of playing in the North American League, and he came from 2 years playing in the NA3. We also had 2 other kids off that roster that were up and down throughout the year, and when it came to the playoff roster crunch, ended up having to go down and play for our 3HL team. And, they obviously did really well and helped our team get to the Fraser Cup not finals, but the weekend where they all go and they compete for who's going to be in the finals and whatnot. It allowed us to advance out of our division. So, that's just within our own program, moving guys down and up and things like that. But, there's players that played on our 3HL team last year that are now playing for a different North American League team because they advanced their way to that team and there just wasn't an opportunity on our own roster. And that happens a lot where you'll see kids move to a different NA if it's the same building, same program, it doesn't limit them from an NA perspective of only if I'm a 3HL Brahma, I can only play for the NA Brahmas. You can move up and play on any of those different teams. So
Awesome.
There's movement for sure. It's
Yep.
just, people think that it's going to happen for everyone, and it's still the cream rises to the top type of deal.
Yep. So Pete asked the question, any rumors for Tier 2 expansion in East NCDC or no? Probably a little too early to get some solidified answers on that. Look, I am anti-expansion right now. I really am. And I'm usually not. But the pyramid, the way it's set up right now, the USHL is now pushing towards a third of the size of the null. So we've got this nice push up, and then you've got levels below that. I can't say that I want to see, my personal opinion is I really don't want to see the null grow. Maybe repositioning a couple teams that might have struggles in their market to make the league travel better and to get exposed better, that's fine. But that's just my opinion. I've heard no rumors. Mike, we haven't really talked about this yet this year. Your thoughts?
I mean, I've heard rumors. I don't know how true they are. I've heard more from an expansion standpoint in the NCDC than I have necessarily in the NA.
Right.
But I haven't heard anything from like a real concrete source that this is happening. But I think a lot of these programs are considering expansion. I think that's something always on the radar. But I kind of like, we talked about it before too with the USHL. They've been at 16 for forever, it seems. And
it's not really 16. It's not really 16 because you got
15 in the development program.
Yeah. So one of the things that was on the discussion board, and it's one of the parents' thought process is, and there was clearly a negative experience with the tender process, but the comment is it's a trap, and I let out by talking about is this a trap? I actually put that in the title of tonight's live stream. Is the tender a trap? I struggle with that because what could you be trapped into unless it's a trap in this respect? If you didn't go in understanding a tender, I could see how you think it's a trap. Because if you get tendered and you don't make the team, you can go, put all my eggs in that basket, okay? And it didn't work out. So I can understand that. I can understand if you didn't do the research on the team that you got tendered by. You got tendered by a team that has very few opportunities for your position for the next year. You're a left wing and they're returning 4 left wings. Boom. You're in the stands for the first 15 games of the year because they returned all their players and they wanted you because they like your skill, but you can't crack that lineup. I can understand how, once again, lack of preparation could make a tender feel like a trap. But I'm not sure I can see a trap outside of that. And maybe it's my bias of being involved, as an owner, as a coach. But I've also been involved as a parent and went through the tender process. And numerous players have tendered over the years. Mike, what are your thoughts on this? I don't want to overkill this, but do you see any way that this should be looked at as a trap?
No, that I've never heard. I've heard a lot of narratives in my day. I've never heard that. Most of the time, the tendering process is like the most coveted that both the player, family, and team, they want to be tendered because that's them having the choice of where they want to play. So, really, I agree with you on your point is if they didn't do their homework and they ended up just, again, I kind of said it without even knowing this question. If you tender right away November 1st when tenders are available and you don't wait to see like what other opportunities are there and you're like, oh crap, I just signed this tender and now this is where I've chosen I've chosen to be an asset of this program. That's on you. That's not on the tendering process. So,
right. If that team has a bad year and they have a new coach the next year, if that team, doesn't have a depth to it, probably the only time I'd say to sign on November 1st is if you've built a good relationship with that team over a longer period of time. They're a quality team. They're always in a position where they're moving players on. That makes sense, but that's the consistency of doing your homework, Another one comes in. Question comes in on: can you touch on the value of being named an affiliate player to an all team? And thanks, guys. Welcome back.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. The way that it works, at least for the North American League, I know there's affiliates and things like that with the USHL, and it's a little bit different, but kind of the same. You get to a certain point in the season. So let's say in the North American League, you get past Christmas, we have to submit our affiliate list. At no point through the remainder of the season could we ever play any player in our lineup that either wasn't on our affiliate list or wasn't on our active roster. So those lists are very important because if you do get some injuries that happen, well, where are you going to find additional players from? Well,
Right.
your affiliate list. You bring them up from wherever they're playing AAA or prep or whatever else, and you get the opportunity to not only have them fill in your roster and take away a spot from a kid that might be injured and there's a hole there, but you also are hoping to add your affiliate list to potential tenders or draft picks that you have for the next year, and then that gives you an opportunity to also get them into your lineup a year early than when you would actually be taking them on your team the following year. So they get a little bit of a head start on what the level is like and the competition and maybe what the coaches are working on from a system standpoint. They're getting an early look on that. So if you're
Yeah.
not on that affiliate list, you don't get that opportunity.
So jumping back, only because some comments have popped up, we've probably only got about a third of our comments showing up. I'm monitoring the other platforms, and one of them is our discussion group. And one of our members there, it said that it initially brought up the trap part. The reasoning behind it, and I'm trying to understand this, is that our member believes that the team gets the advantage because the player has to commit to the team, and the team doesn't have to honor the tender. And I guess the once again, it's the understanding of what a tender is. If you're a USHL tender, it's a much different story. A USHL tender, you're one of the best players. That tender is going to be the top player coming in of that class that year. They give up a draft pick, they get a tender. And the tender and the drafts in the USHL are completely different. The drafting process in the USHL is completely different than the null. Once again, I explained earlier, the null draft system doesn't always take the best player first. It could be the player that they want to glean some attention to, like, hey, we picked you first. But it may not be the best player that's playing in the BCHL right now or playing in the AJHL right now that they actually take in the 8th or 9th round because they want to get his rights, but they're not quite sure he's going to step in the door. I'm getting off track a little bit. The organization does have to, if you completely understand the process going in and you're completely understanding of what a tender is a ticket to the main camp. Period. No more, no less. Okay, what it does is it says, hey, look, you sign with us. And remember, it's a two-way street. You're signing to want to be a part of that organization. That team is signing saying, we will commit to you to get you there. Period. Okay, it ends right there. At that point, you are now in a situation where you have to prove yourself. Period. Just like a veteran player does, you can say, well, if you're using that logic, you can say any veteran that's ever been cut, the team didn't honor their commitment to that player. Well, this is sport, and sport means performance is part of the equation, or conduct is part of the equation. If your attitude and your performance are not part of what the team is looking for, they have every right at that point to say, nope, this is not a good fit. But I'll tell you what, most people, here's the way the tender process works at U18. You look in the locker room and you go, yo, you been tendered yet? You look over here and you go, yo, you been tendered yet? And it becomes this thing where it's a prestige thing, okay? Oh, you're not tendered? I'm tendered. And it becomes this issue about being tendered is more important than who you're tendered by. Being tendered is more important than development at that point because you feel like you've as a player and as a family that you're up in that next echelon. It's no different than when people brag about having an advisor. It starts at 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. Oh, you got an advisor? Oh, I've got an advisor. And it becomes this thing that it's not your ability and your merit. It becomes more about what you have. Okay. Tenders are only a commitment to get you in the door, period. I've said that for years now, and we've been very, very clear on this program to explain that process. If anybody reads more into it, you're reading into it more than what's there. Okay. They have to be honored. Tenders have to be honored up to that point. Okay. I've never heard, and maybe it's happened, a tender to sign and the team says, no, we're not inviting you to main camp. I mean, I guess there could be something attitude-wise or conduct-wise that could have made that happen, or maybe that the player broke their contract by skating with a different team in that league. But Mike, anything you got to add to that? I'm just responding to some of our comments.
Yeah, I think the way that I see it, when someone's saying like you're trapped in some way, if you end up going to main camp as a tendered player and you don't make it, you are no longer an asset of that team. So you go back as a free agent. So you're able to freely go to any other NA team and make it because you're not on their protected list. So there's really you're not trapped. You're not stuck to go play in a different league. If you don't make the team with the team you tendered with, you're then a free agent to go anywhere you choose. So there's really no trap.
And you're a free agent with the moniker of tendered player. So and I said this earlier before you came on, Mike, if I get cut from Team A and Team A says, no, I'm sorry, we're not going to protect you going into the fall. You're free to go anywhere. If I pick up the phone and I start calling other null teams, they immediately go to Elite Prospects and they go, wow, they can't play. They do our version on the back end of Elite Prospects. That's not a true statement. They won't go to Elite Prospects. They'll go to the back end and they go, oh, he was a tendered player. He's not lying. He was tendered by this team. They're going to give you more credence to be at their main camp because of that than any average Joe off the street, because somebody's already taken the time to vet you to say, we believe this player has the ability to play in the null. Getting cut, I mean, it happens all the time. There's a huge number of tenders that get cut, and I don't know what the percentage is, but I bet you there's 50, 60, 70 players a year that get cut from the team that originally tendered them, but they still play in the league. Now, sometimes the team helps them. They go, you're not going to fit here, but I already called over here. Go over to that main camp, and you really will fit with them much better than you will us. And the coach will call that coach and say, hey, I sent a guy over to you. Here's who he is. That happens all the time. So there is a huge amount of players. I just looked one up earlier, and I hope I can pull this up, and I hope it's the right player. No, and I can't type for whatever reason. I can't do it on my keyboard. I just looked up a player at random from some tenders that I was going through, and it was a team. It was off the stats off that article that I was kind of commenting on earlier. She had all these stats up, and I went, you know what? That's not fair to say that team's low on tenders, because 5 of their tenders are playing in the league. They're just not playing for them. So yeah, it could be. To say the tender is only to get you on the one team, no, it kind of gives you a ticket into the next inner circle. It doesn't mean that you're going to grab a hold, but it keeps you in the game, at least in my opinion. Mike, you agree with that?
Yeah, I think when teams tender a player, again, because they all happen before the draft, your hope as an organization is that player is going to be on your roster and it's going to fill, a specific spot. But, a lot of times when you look at if they tendered in November to when you get to July, you're talking about almost half the year goes by before they report. There's a lot of things that happen. They could have plateaued from a talent perspective and got passed up. They could have taken their foot off the gas. They could not have trained in the off season. Like, a lot of things happen where these kids show up and it's like, geez, like what happened? Like, he's gotten passed up. That happens. It's not a perfect science. It's not a perfect science when you draft guys in the NHL. It's not a perfect science when you tender guys in the North American League.
Okay, I'm going to jump into one more. That was a great answer, Mike, and I fully agree with you. I'm going to jump into one more from our discussion group that I promised I would try to get a little time on tonight. My kid is a high school freshman. He is nearly a year younger than the rest of the kids on his team since he started school earlier. He is small, only 5'2" and 100 pounds right now. He's eager to play juniors in college. He does work extra on his own, as not always we are willing or can afford to pay for privates and dry land. He will never be able to play NCAA level. I don't think he is good enough. We don't mind if he was able to play ACHA D2 or D3 as soon as he's happy on the ice. The grades are important to me and, of course, to him. Where do I start? What is the path to take? Should he try out for AAA and then to college? Thank you. That's a great question. So you got a high school freshman. What's a freshman? 14 years old?
Yeah. Well, he said he's young, though, right? So he could
Right.
be 13.
So he's an October or November birth.
Yeah.
One of the younger kids,
They
one of the
say
small.
what area?
What's that?
What area they're from?
Doesn't say
High
that.
school hockey is different depending on the state.
Yeah. Yep. So he's a freshman. He's not playing D1 because he asked if he should be playing or D1. He's not playing AAA or Tier 1 right now because he asked if he should try out for one of those teams and then to college. So I would suggest going to last week's conversation with Mike Hermbrodt. Mike runs an ACHA program, Illinois State, that has Division I, Division II, and Division III under their umbrella. He absolutely is one of the best. He's a Hall of Famer at the ACHA level, and there's very few that are better at understanding the process than him. We spent an hour with him last week, and he walked through this whole process. I can tell you this, ACHA D2, depending on the competitive level of a team, you're mostly going to have guys coming from, you're going to have a very few guys coming from the NAL level for whatever reason. You're going to have a few coming from the NCDC, and then you're going to have a lot of guys coming from NA3HL and a lot of guys coming from the USHL or USPHL Premier and Elite Leagues. So you're gonna see that the vast majority of those players have 1 to 3 years of juniors under their belt, even to play ACHA club. You get down to Tier 3, things change a little bit. The door opens for high school players to come out, but mostly it's competitive 4-year high school players or competitive guys that are coming out playing solid hockey at their senior year. So from my perspective on this, you're asking a question. Does he just focus on ACHA? I think you've kind of lined it up. He's going in the right direction, but where he plays at is contingent on do you need to play AAA hockey to play ACHA club hockey? It depends on the program. Okay, there's hundreds of ACHA D3 programs. You had mentioned that your academics are very important and strong in your family. That's great. So I would actually, in this situation, work backwards from an academic fit first. Just go out and pick out the top 10 schools that seem to fit right now. He's a freshman. This could change. But I'd start out with top 10 schools that he'd be interested in that are realistic choices. In other words, you can afford to it, he can academically get into, and it fits for what he's desiring to get out of college. Even if he doesn't know what he wants, his personality, his interests and his likes. If he's really into, math and the hard sciences, you don't want to go to a school that's, all artsy and, they've got a choir and they've got a freaking drawing team, I'm making that up, but you know what I'm saying. What I would do is then I'd see which one of them have ACHA hockey. These days, it seems like everybody's got ACHA hockey. Then that's where elite prospects come in. Pull up elite prospects and just look at the roster and see where they're coming from. Then you can match up and say, hey, look, if I stay on the path I'm on, I have a really good chance of making that. Then once let's say you narrow it down to 3 or 4 programs by seeing if they fit academically, they fit monetarily, they fit regionally for what you want, and all those things are going good. They've got hockey, and they've got ACHA D3 hockey. Then turn around and at that point, reach out to the team, reach out to the coach or the assistant coach. At that level, it is much easier to make contact with a team than it is at the D3 or D1 level, which protect their coaches, and they don't want random phone calls coming in. ACHA, they might drive over that day to meet with you. If they're in freaking Minnesota and you're in Chicago, they might drive to meet you that day because they're so interested in getting a player and a quality player. So, Mike, anything you want to add to that? I'm joking on that. They're not going to drive over and see you, but You know what I mean? Mike, anything you want to add to that?
I was going to say, when it comes to their interest level and their communication back to you, make sure if you're reaching out to college club teams that you've actually been accepted into that school. Because if you haven't, you could imagine how many people would be reaching out to them, and they just won't respond back if they know you haven't even gone through the process of getting into the school.
Well, I think it's how you set. I think it's a little bit of how you set yourself up for that, though. If you're a freshman and you're still exploring avenues, I'm not really sure you need to apply yet. I think you might want to wait a little bit But if you're trying to nurture a path, the other thing you can do is go watch them play. You want to find out what the level's like. Go watch a D1 ACHA D1 play, then go watch an ACHA D3 team play. You'll figure out real quick where you're going to fit. The other thing too is as you get older, like Mike's saying, when you get up to that point where you're a junior and senior, they have these skates. They have prospect skates, and Mike Hernbrot talked a lot about that. About they do 3 or 4 prospect skates to find guys that are a good match. You could absolutely jump out and get into a prospect skates. Not as a freshman. I think you had a little time though. But what do you think, Mike?
Where I was going with that is that not all programs are created equal. So I just did a presentation on this earlier today where I had the stats in front of me, so I still have them memorized. At the ACHA D1 level, there's 68 schools. Now, Team 1 to Team 68, where they get their players and how they operate are completely different. When you get to ACHA Division 2, there's 188 teams at the ACHA D2 level. So again, from the best team at the D2 level to the 188th team, not only from the coaching and the school support and all this other stuff, it's a completely different world. So you got to have a better understanding of like what school you're going to and what the hockey situation is like. And then you get down to D3. D3's got over 140 ACHA D3 schools. So between D2 and D3, you're talking about close to 300 schools that offer this program. So from an ability standpoint, if you're playing, pretty high level AA, or you're the high school the state that you play in has pretty good hockey, you could walk your way onto some of those programs. Not all the programs, but some of them. When it gets to the high level D2, like Jeff was saying, or obviously D1, they're looking for players that have played juniors that they're bringing in for those teams.
And the last thing I'm going to say on that is be careful, do your homework on ACHA too. Perfect example, and I'm going to juxtapose 2 different hockey brands, Illinois State and Michigan. Right off the bat, which would you say was the most prestigious, even at the ACHA level, and the team that's most organized across the board? What's the answer?
Michigan, champions of the West.
Right, of course. Okay. However, when it comes to big name schools, their ACHA programs may not give you the same thing you're going to get in a smaller branded school. Illinois State has paid coaches on 3 different levels. They have a director of their overall program. They do film. They do year-round stuff, and they put a lot of effort into developing players from 3 to 2, from 2 to 1, and they move players through that way. Michigan, on the other hand, is a high academic school outside of being a Division I player there. Yes, they do have coaches, but the coaches are in a different situation. They're not recruiting there. There is no recruiting process in place like there are at other schools. They take what they can get because they know they're a huge school and they're going to get enough kids to come out to tryouts, and they'll be able to put a quality roster together. So just be careful there. Do your homework. It doesn't mean that Michigan doesn't have a good program. I have one of my kids playing there right now. It's fine. It's a great program for what it is. But if you're looking for, hey, we have a power play meeting between periods, and we do film. We do film 14 days a week, 14 hours a week. You're not going to get that there. That's not part of their process. Whereas you go to a school like Illinois State, and I know the program well. I'm not telling it's a good fit for you. I'm just going to say you are going to get film. You are going to get power play meetings. You are going to get, a lot of individual meetings with coaches about where you're at and what your development path is up. That's not going to happen with some teams that just treat it like a club sport, and club means club to them, So does that make sense? Did I say that right, Mike?
Yeah, I think we shared enough information where they get the gist.
No, I want to talk another 10 minutes on this.
You can. I'll listen.
All right, that's about it for the night. I think we kicked it on as many topics as we could. Thanks back, Mike. Good to see you again for being back. Thanks for being back. I know you're busy today, so I'm glad you jumped on. Now we're rolling again. This is like our season's back into play now. Michigan football's over with, so I don't have to go stand on the sidelines and act cool and have Blake on one side and JJ on the other side and giving the wink and a nod over to Jimbo as he's calling the plays. Giving a thumbs up, that's a good call. Yeah, I'd go with that one too. No, I did.
Now that you're gone, you're back from your hiatus of taking like a 2-month vacation during the middle of the hockey season, where typically my Wednesdays would be this podcast. Once that was gone, I had people filling up my Wednesday nights with different things. So now I got to start clearing my schedule that I know that we're going to be doing this again. And
I did take a nice vacation, didn't I?
You did. You were living the dream for a while. I was jealous.
Yeah. Europe is nice in the November time frame.
Yeah.
But I told you a long time beforehand. I gave you plenty of heads up on that.
No, I know you did. But what I'm saying is my Wednesday nights started to get filled with different things to keep up with, the open availability. And now people think that it's still open. And then we end up with tonight and, things run behind and I'm late getting here to see you.
Yeah, and that's the only reason I let this go a little longer today is because I wanted Mike to have that full exposure back so everybody got their fill of Mike and can say they got everything they need. Last words coming in from Frank, and Frank says, glad to see you broke the 1,000 subscribers on our YouTube page, but now we got to get to 2,000 folks, and I appreciate it. Frank, you're a big part of it. You're a big fan and a big cheerleader for our program, and we appreciate you. And I appreciate you bringing that up. But there's 2 things you can do to help us, and I'll say this last, and then we got to go. One, you can like and follow our page, subscribe to us on our Junior Hockey Advisor YouTube page. You can go to our Facebook discussion group and make sure you become a member there. That's unbelievable. That group is, like I said, we rarely comment on things because the group, as a tribe, come together and they hash it out, and 90% of the times, 95% of the times, they're spot on. They get you in the right way. You just got to read through a little bit, but it's better to have a little over here and a little over there, and you figure it out than versus us coming on and trying to pound it down your throat. So thank you so much. The other thing you can really do to help us is go to our Facebook page, not the discussion group, but the page itself. And if you like us, put a good comment on there. Give us a good rating, put a good comment on there. We'd love that. It would really help us in the long run as we do what we're doing to grow this. So, Mike, anything else?
Just to go on with that, I know a lot of the people that follow us are pretty loyal. So, having them like and subscribe, they've already done it before. But most of them, you have other hockey families and people that you play alongside of, and they may not know who we are. So, share that with them and help us grow this to be an even bigger platform.
Any of you get a picture, I'll give a $25 Howie's hockey tape card to anybody with a sandwich board standing out in front of the rink promoting us. You put a sandwich board on. I might even go to $50 on that. But if you got a sandwich board out in front of the rink, espousing how great we are, that's worth it for us.
We need to get somebody from the Bills Mafia to have one of those sandwich boards on, and then jump through a table at this weekend's game, being out in 30 below weather and snow and everything else. That would be something that we need to do. You get out.
So, Mike, now you just put us in a situation where there's risk involved, and if somebody does that, now we get sued. We lose this whole empire.
But you're giving money away, so let's just give as much as we can.
I wasn't giving it away for starting myself on fire and jumping from 15 feet up into a freaking folding table. Oh, now I got to find something else to do with my time because I'm going to lose this whole thing. All right, folks, thanks so much. Mike, thank you. Good to see you again. Everybody, we'll see you next week. And thank you for all of you that stuck with us till the end with our nonsense. See you. Bye.